Hi, I'm Jonah, Comstock, Editor-in-Chief at pharmaphorum. I'm here at Frontiers Health 2022 with Megan Coder. Megan is the Chief Policy Officer at the Digital Therapeutics Alliance. Hi, Megan.
Hello.
How's your show going so far?
It's been great. It's always great being back here. It's like seeing family again and new friends that we never knew we had. So it's been wonderful.
So DTA has a new sort of relationship with healthware. That's one of the big things this year, or not new, but recently
Honestly,
announced.
no, it's been great. So I founded Digital Therapeutics Alliance about 5 years ago, and Roberto was a part of that. So he was really part of DTA from the onset. With healthware, we've been working on a variety of different projects and initiatives, but this year, you're correct, we launched together this European DTX policy effort. It's a coalition that really brings together these different policymakers from really all around Europe. And healthware has been really great to work with throughout this whole process.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but here at the event, there's going to be a meeting of that coalition, or
There is.
the trying to
Yes.
move those objectives forward tomorrow, right?
It is. And the good news is we're welcoming everyone who's in attendance to come join us for that. But what we've been realizing is that there's a lot of different policies and a lot of different ideas out there. And there's a lot of countries that are moving forward on developing their notions related to digital health, M-health, digital medical devices, digital therapeutics, whatever the names are. So we're trying to bring them all together and discuss how can we do this more harmonized? Is there a level of convergence we can create? So tomorrow's panel and discussion really is how do we start to create more of that case study? Like, why does it matter to them? What are some of the barriers? What are some of the enablers that we can point to say, hey, you guys are all doing great jobs in your ecosystems. However, here are considerations you may like to take into account to be able to move forward in a more harmonized way.
Got it. Yeah, when you come to an event like this, you really do realize that it's a global ecosystem, and
Yeah.
we have kind of more in common than not. And so then for the governments to sort of not be on that page, right? If they're each trying to regulate each ecosystem separately, it's a little bit of a disconnect, right? It's a little hard.
Especially in Europe, where there is this idea in many terms of a single market notion, but then you have every single country developing their own pathways, and that becomes very challenging for companies then who are trying to go to market in multiple pathways, countries to really get patients to be able to use their products and benefit. How do they proceed? How do they progress? So if we can work on something to at least move that forward, I think that'll be beneficial to patients around Europe and globally.
Yeah, I mean, having just covered the U.S. market for a lot of my
Yeah.
career, I know just keeping on top of what one regulatory agency wants out of a digital therapeutic is hard, much less
Yes, there's a lot going on.
um, outside of the regulatory, the policy side,
Yeah.
which I know is your wheelhouse. What are some of the things going on with digital therapeutics right now that you're excited about? Some things you're excited to talk about at the show?
Well, I think it's been one of those ideas where we've seen a lot of evolution over time. So when we first started the alliance, there's a very defined set of like this is what a DTX is, and that has really moved. Like the definition has not changed per se. We're still looking at software that treats, manages, or prevents a disease or disorder. But the types of ideas that are coming out are really incredible to see around the different modalities. Even on stage, we're seeing a lot of virtual reality or augmented reality, using all these to say, hey, we're going to use this now for disease state, not just for entertainment or other areas that was first developed in. So I think just to see that evolution in the types of products and the types of opportunities for patient care, that's been really great to see over the last couple of years too.
So there was a little bit of discussion earlier today about, and this came out of, I think, Matthew Holt and I were discussing right here about the Kristen Milburn's panel, and something that Jeff Dashis from OneDrop said. It was about, can digital therapeutics really thrive in existing systems, existing infrastructures, or if we're going to see kind of digital therapeutics work the way that they, to their full potential, the way that they can, will they need to be in sort of new infrastructures that are created? That's the question. I know I've been quite vague in how I presented that, but
I appreciate that.
but what do you think? I mean, this
Yeah.
is, you spent all day thinking about this stuff, right?
I do. I think there's a balance, and I don't want to say like it's the middle road, but I think it is the middle road. So the idea where you can have a digital therapeutic that is going to be aligned with a medication or in-person therapy, that still is a part of that same system and that process. But making sure that you have the right prescribing systems, the right dispensing systems, that you have the right feedback methodologies, because again, drugs, they don't tell you how the patient performed and what their issues or concerns were or what their outcomes are going to be or their trending data is. So you need to build a system for digital therapeutics to be able to do that, to still fit inside and along with other pathways that exist. So I think that idea where we're using DTX products to optimize the entirety of the care pathway is really what we're aiming for. So it does need to fit within that modality, broadly speaking, but there do need to be different things that we need to create that will actually enable that and the specificities of digital therapeutics. One of the things I mentioned earlier was even clinical evidence. The idea of having a fit for purpose clinical evidence set of requirements, it sounds counterintuitive or it doesn't make sense right away, but when you think about it, it's really necessary. Just to say, well, drugs used it, so therefore it must be fine for DTX. We're realizing that that may not always be the case. So how do we start to create these ideas that are basing themselves on pharmaceutical or in-person therapies, but they're still specific fit for purpose to DTX?
There was a whole panel at DTX East about the idea of a digital therapeutics sham and whether it even made any sense and what it should look like.
Sham meaning as a clinical trials, not
Yeah,
that
like a
DTXs are
placebo,
sham.
like a placebo, or they make these sham
Yep.
apps, and they spend a
Yeah.
lot of time developing these apps just so that they have like a good control group for DTX, and it's really unclear whether it's really a meaningful measure or not.
No, it's true. And then unless a clinician or a payer knows what they're asking about, they'll just be like, I think that's what we need because that's what it does for drugs, but they may not be asking the right question. So therefore then companies may be developing the wrong evidence, which then helps no one either at the end of the game. So having more clarity as this industry evolves will be a big focus for us as an ecosystem for the next year or two, for sure.
One more question. You mentioned something earlier about how digital therapeutics often have their own feedback built in. They're not a one-way intervention like a drug. You give it to the patient and then you don't really know what happens. There's ongoing interaction, and the real-world evidence, as we might call it in the drug world, is built right in. And that's really interesting. I honestly have not thought much about that aspect of DTX, and so I'd love
Oh,
to
it's great.
hear just a little bit of, yeah, how do you change the systems to sort of take advantage of that?
Well, one of them is even convincing physicians and clinicians to use that data. They're not used to seeing it, so it's not in their mindset either to say, hey, I could go use this and really optimize not only the DTX therapy, but then the entirety of therapy too. One quick distinction, because I nerdy and like terms like this, but when digital therapeutics create their outcomes, we're looking at it as real world data. So that's data that's just being generated continuously by digital therapeutics. Clinicians could use it, caregivers could use it under data governance requirements and so forth. But it's when you take that real world data and put it into what could be an RCT design or pragmatic style design, that is the real world evidence. So the real world evidence is much more of a formal process that some payers are using, some regulatory agencies are using, but that is another whole area too where we need to do much more education on because it will be different than what the drug perspectives are for real world evidence and data with some of the same notions. So again, it's that middle pathway that I think we're talking about.
Awesome, and never apologize for making a fine distinction. I think that's, yeah, really important. I think you could do a whole panel on the difference between data and evidence, and I probably people have. So,
I don't think so. We should maybe do that next year. Let's talk about that.
well, thank you so much, Megan. This has been great, and I hope you have a great rest of the show and
Thank
a
you.
really productive meeting of the coalition.
Thanks for having me.